I will welcome everyone to Core Volunteer Training. Everyone, we're so glad that you're here tonight, and we're very honored to have our very own Andres Jimenez, who is Senior Director for Government Affairs for Citizens Climate Lobby, on the call as our resident expert in DC to let us know all about an insider's view on Congress. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we start tonight. The lesson is being recorded, so afterwards, if anyone has any questions or would like to make sure that something is reviewable, we will have a chance to make sure to share that out. So with that, let me just have a chance. It's an honor to introduce Andres. Andres comes to CCL from an extensive background on the Hill and beyond. His strong history of public service includes having worked for former mayor of New York City, Michael Bloomberg, the House Judiciary's Immigration Subcommittee, Congresswoman Linda Sanchez, and Congressman Howard Berman. His work also includes working with Green Latinos, as well as serving on the board of the Florida Ocean Alliance, where he represented the interests of ocean conservancy. Andres works on both the House and the Senate side now with CCL to help expand our voice as an organization, as well as to push relevant legislation through. And we are truly honored to have Andres on the call tonight. Thank you for being here, and I'll pass it over in just a quick little bit. One area of emphasis that I'd love to share is our learning goals for tonight, as we always do to kind of review what we're here for. After tonight's lesson, attendees should be able to gain a deeper sense of what the typical day in the life of a congressional staffer looks like. They'll be able to understand the makeup of Congress, as well as how to best engage congressional staff in the legislative process. We'll also make sure to highlight some of the overlooked challenges and opportunities that our elected officials face. And then we'll close on preparing to use those tools to be more engaged with our members of Congress moving ahead. And a quick look at the agenda tonight. We're going to first have Andres cover membership in the House and the Senate, a lot of the most important terminology to know for our volunteer base, talking about the importance of committees and their oversight and areas of what they work on, the two different chambers and how they differ culturally and institutionally. We're going to talk more about an insider's view of the congressional offices and what it's like to work there. Speaking to somebody that has worked there before, several of them actually, in fact. And then Andres is going to welcome a DC staffer to the call to have a direct Q&A with about 20 minutes into the presentation. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Andres, and it is an honor to learn alongside of all of you from his wisdom and expertise on the Hill. The show is yours, Andres.
Brett, for that wonderful introduction. And hello, everyone. I'm extremely excited to see all of you here tonight, and I'm glad that those who couldn't join by video are calling in. And so let's get going. Some of this might be some of the things that we're going to review tonight might be something you know, and some of it might not. So just bear with the stuff you already know. So basics of U.S. Congress membership. So Congress has two chambers, the Senate chamber and the House of Representatives. So in the Senate, you have 2 senators per state. There's 100 senators total. They serve 6-year terms. In the House, it's by district, which is based on population. So you have 1 representative per district. So for example, tonight we'll be hearing from Justin Pelletier from Nydia Velasquez's office, and she represents the New York 7th district. So she is the 1 representative for that district. There are 435 members in the United States House of Representatives, and they serve a shorter term. They don't serve the long 6 years that the Senate does. They serve 2 years. So I think that covers what how the House is made up and how the Senate is made up. So I think if we can move on to basics of U.S. Congress and committees. So I have a unique perspective in that I worked both in a House office, so I got to find out what it was working for a member in their personal office, and so I got to work with the district office and the office in DC. And then I moved over to a committee, which Brett mentioned was the Immigration Subcommittee, which is part of the bigger Judiciary Committee. And so I was able to also get a perspective of how committees work. They're both very important with with House offices, you're looking to work more with constituents. You're taking calls, you're working with the member, you're working on legislation that's coming out of some of the committees, you're helping the boss figure out what bills she should and shouldn't be on, you're taking calls, you're writing back letters from constituents just like you, and you're interacting with other offices quite a lot. In a committee, you're actually not working with constituents at all. So you're working on legislation all day, you're forming ideas on legislation that can work with the members on the committee. And so it's less of an engagement with constituents, if that makes any sense. So again, basics of US Congress and committees. Committees is where the work is done. There are 3 types of committees. There is the standing committees. Now, standing committees are permanent panels. They have legislative jurisdiction. Standing committees consider bills and issues and recommend measures for consideration by their respective chambers. So when I was on the immigration subcommittee, for example, that was a standing committee. Now there's select committees. Select committees are temporary ones that do things like conduct investigations or conduct studies. And then you have joint committees. Joint committees are permanent, but focus on housekeeping tasks rather than considering measures. So when you think of a committee, when you're thinking of a committee, a standard committee, you're thinking of a standing committee. And that's the one that's the most common, the one you'll hear on C-SPAN, and the one you'll see most likely members of Congress at when they zoom in to what's going on in the Hill. That's not uncommon for a committee with the same jurisdiction to go by a different name in the different chambers. So for example, the House will have Ways and Means, but in the Senate it won't be called Ways and Means. In the Senate it'll be called the Senate Finance Committee. And these committees decide which bills and resolutions move forward for consideration by the House or Senate as a whole. And that's what's going on in a committee. Now, committees hold a lot of power. So basically in a committee, especially in the House committee, you're going through not only the committee process where the bill is going to be sent to, so you're going to start at a subcommittee level. And after it gets out of the subcommittee with or without amendments, you're going to move to the full committee. And that has all of the members from the committee, whereas the subcommittees are broken down a little bit more. And then once you're through the committee, that's when it'll go to the House floor or Senate for a vote. So if we can move to the next slide, basics of US Congress with the chambers, and we'll talk a little bit about the difference between the Senate. So first, in the Senate, committees can be easily bypassed, where in the House, committees are absolutely, they're very, very important, and bills most likely won't see the House floor unless they go through the committee. In the Senate, committees most likely don't always have to go through that. Bills don't have to go through that committee process, and they can be on the floor much quicker than going through that whole process than in the House. In the Senate, there's more open debate, where because bills go through the committee process, they are limited in the debate process in the House. Now, in the Senate, riders are introduced as amendments, where in the House, once a bill is on the floor, there are limited number of amendments, and there is a thing called non-germane. When an amendment is brought forward and it has nothing to do with the subject matter of the bill, it's called non-germane, and so it gets X'd out. And what happens a lot is members will put in the House, they'll put in an amendment that is non-germane, and they'll do it on purpose so that they can go on the floor and they can speak about the issue that they want, knowing that at some point it'll be X'd out, but it gives them time to speak on the floor on whatever issue they want. So it's kind of, they're bypassing kind of what should be going on. So it's kind of a way for them to get extra time to talk about an issue. So sometimes you'll see a member bring up a non-germane bill, and you're just like, this has nothing to do with what this bill is about. it's because they want extra floor time, or they want extra time to be able to go out and talk about an issue that they really want. And they know that it's going to be non-germane, and they know that it'll be X'd out and it won't be part of what's in the bill. So in the Senate, there's less of a hierarchy. There's generalists, they're more generalist, where in the House, there is absolutely a huge hierarchy, and you've seen that when it comes to, for example, Nancy Pelosi continuing to be the ranking for the House Democrats. Everything runs very much by hierarchy in the House, and people follow that hierarchy when it comes to voting. In the Senate, you will see less of a hierarchy, and you'll see more members who will go on their own and won't follow leadership as much, whereas in the House, following leadership tends to be quite the norm. Now in the Senate, and you might have seen this over the last couple of years with Senator Rubio, the Senate is very focused on foreign policy. Senator Rubio, for example, right before he ran for president, focused a lot of his work in the last couple of years on foreign issues, whereas in the House, tax and revenue seem to be much more of an important issue that they cover and that they focus on as members of the whole. Now, in the Senate, because of the number of senators and how that's structured, you'll find that there are fewer committees and fewer subcommittees. In the House, when you're dealing with so many members and a lot more committees, because there are so many members and so many members want to be engaged and want to work on so many different issues. So you'll definitely see that. All right, so let's go through offices. Now there's different types of offices, as I mentioned earlier. There are local and state or district offices that they're called, and that 100% addresses constituent concerns. So what they're looking for and what they're hiring in a district office are caseworkers for the most part. They want every single person in the district who comes in, they want to be able to field all of their concerns and all of their needs. So when you go into one of your local offices and you say, you know, I need to contact a certain department, or I'm not getting these benefits, or this is going on in my school, or this is going on in my neighborhood, they will 100% be ready to address the concerns that you have at that local level. Now, they probably won't be fully equipped to handle what's going on when it comes to policy in DC. They may know a decent amount, obviously, working for the member, but what they're there to do is a lot of casework and make sure that the constituents at home get the answers that they deserve. And so, you know, the difference between DC offices and, you know, district offices can be a lot depending on the office and depending on the issues that they all cover. So where a specific district might really need immigration help, another district might need a lot of VA help, or housing issues. Like if you're in New York has the largest public housing authority in the country. So a lot of the district offices are doing a lot of work when it comes to their residents and trying to help them with housing issues. So offices, yeah, they vary in makeup. Each office has its own budget, and it's up to them on how they're going to spend that budget. So some offices will have lots of staff that they'll use a lot of their budget on, and they'll divide it up. And some offices have very few staff and decide to put their resources and the money that they're given into something else. So whether it's travel expenses or putting on different events for the member, each office it's up to each office to figure out how to spend the money that they're given. Yes, so now let's go through the always important legislative office roles. So each office has pretty much the same basic title. Sometimes they vary, but for the most part, these names that are here are going to be pretty much in every single office. So you have a scheduler. starting at the bottom. And the scheduler is working with the chief of staff and with the member of Congress to make sure that the member of Congress gets on their planes or in their cars and is going to the meetings that they need to, and is helping them go from one meeting to another to go vote and then back. So they're very important. So when you make meetings with your member of Congress, the schedulers are key. So always be extremely kind and thank your schedulers when making meetings. After that, you have your staff assistants. Staff assistants are the folks who are at the very front of the offices. Now they're answering phones. Sometimes they're helping to write letters. They are the folks that if you want a flag hung at the Capitol, they're the ones who are putting that together. They're giving tours. And they're the face of the office, the first person that you see when you walk in. So they'll usually have a big smile on their face because they want to greet everyone with a warm smile. Following, we have legislative correspondents who are completely in charge of all the letters, emails, phone calls that come in from constituents. So what their job is that they need to put all the letters, whether it's in old-fashioned letter format, by mail, or via email, and they need to sort that and organize that. And in staff meetings, they're the ones who are going to be telling the office what issues are important to constituents. So they play a very key role. One of the biggest things is keeping constituents happy so members get reelected. And if members of Congress aren't writing back or responding to constituents, they're not going to get reelected. So legislative correspondents are key. Following that, you have the legislative assistant. Now you're getting into more of a policy role. Legislative assistants are working with committees. They're attending meetings for their boss. They are going with their boss to committees and writing up talking points for their boss so that their boss is well versed in whatever issue it is that they're going to talk about. Followed by that is the legislative director role, which in a little bit, Justin Pelletier from Nydia Alaska's office will be on, and that's his title, legislative director. Now, the legislative director runs all of the policy in the office. They are in charge of the legislative assistants and the legislative correspondents, and they're in charge of working with them to make sure that everything is running smoothly. They're giving their boss suggestions on what bills or what committees to jump on. So legislative directors are a key policy role in the office. Followed by that, you have the chief of staff. The chief of staff is, I guess, the member of Congress's right-hand person. They're not doing the kind of role that the legislative director is doing, whereas the legislative director is doing all policy, and they're looking at bills all day, and they're making sure that the office is running smoothly. The chief of staff is doing more fundraising, more high-level meetings with donors. They're meeting with big businesses that are in the district, and they're trying to plan ahead for the member of Congress the coming months and the coming years on. So they're more of a big picture kind of job there. So workload, as I remember, the workload can be quite long in Congress. So, you're doing 50 to 70 weeks. It's very fast paced. And I think that even 70 weeks can be a little low. There are times I remember being on the immigration subcommittee where I would come in and it was still dark out. And I would sit in a room with no windows, and I would come back out after work and it was dark out again. So some of the days can be very, very long, and they're cramped. No one has their own office. Everyone shares space. It's a lot of shared space in DC and in the district as well. It says, again, by law, the number of house staff hasn't changed since Disco was king. So that's still going around. And in the last decade, each office has received between 1,000% increase in constituent mail. So you can imagine those long hours and working not only to do their job working on bills and with legislation, but they're also trying to answer all the constituent mail and constituent requests as well. And the average age of a legislative assistant is 27. So sometimes you'll hear that DC is run by a very young crowd, and that's very true. at least for me, those early years are you have to be young and kind of be able to stay awake for long periods of time.
Well, here is to that, Andres. And I'm just going to, at this point, let everyone on the call know that we have a wealth of other videos available through the Congressional Management Foundation. If anyone's interested in finding out more information about, especially kind of an insider's view of Capitol Hill, like Andres has indicated, you can go to community and then under the Learn section here, in our lobbying lessons, essentially kind of find out all about these short little 6-minute videos or less. Each of them gives you a window in, and you can only access them if you have a community handle. They're kind of behind our login wall. But each of them gives you a little window in to even a bit more of the relationship and the background that Andres is explaining. But without further ado, tonight we're actually here with live people. You don't have to listen to a video to get to talk to the experts. So I'm going to pass it over to Andres, who's actually going to introduce Justin, and we'll have a chance to really start having Q&A. The last thing I'll just say is feel free again to *6 yourself if you're on the phone. That unmutes your line. If you are on your computer, to unmute yourself, it's the little microphone button in the lower left. And feel free to use the chat window as well to ask questions. I know that we'll start here with the very first question that Kathy and Jack asks in a little bit. But Andres, I'll pass it to you to introduce the one and only Justin.
Absolutely. Thank you again, Brett. And Justin, I just want to make sure that you're on.
Yep, I'm here. How you doing?
Fantastic. Well, first, let me say thank you very much for
but let's pivot to just quickly talking for the last 10 minutes about what we're going to do in our partner kind of action breakouts. And we are going to actually have another lesson specifically on lobbying, and we'll actually go through a role play where each of us is going to have a chance to play a member of Congress or a constituent visiting them in several weeks, the first lesson in October through this program. But for tonight, one of the big things that we can really emphasize is how to write, engage, email, call our members of Congress, not only for yourself, but also our friends, family, and other social network connections. So many people might not realize, I'm actually going to put this in the chat window, in our community, we have an action center that has specific ways to make it really easy for any individual that's concerned about climate change to contact a member of Congress. Now, like Justin and Andre said, the important thing is personalizing it, not having a form letter that you just cut and paste. But if you're interested in writing or emailing your member of Congress, just go to the Action Center and click on this Write or Email Congress tab. It's a wonderful form field that fills in for zip code specific information so anyone can use it. And you can easily kind of even specifically right now use the hurricanes, fires, and heat waves that we've been dealing with to really contextualize your concern through this Action Center. If I were online, I could click that, and each of these tabs has specific tips. The other thing I'll just highlight is we also have a Call Congress Action Center. And so if you are interested in having more of a personal kind of voice, face-to-face almost, or voice-to-voice on the phone, we have this as well that you can share with your family, friends, contacts. And we really want to emphasize that this is scalable. So the more people that are engaged in this process, as we heard Justin and Andres mention, the more our members of Congress notice this, the more that we're sharing this, the more we can really elevate this issue as an important issue to pay attention to in spite of whatever other context we might be inheriting in the current event sphere that we live in. And so what I'd love to do tonight is really encourage everyone in your partner groups to visit the Action Center in community and play around while you're on the phone together to see what specific short-term or long-term goal you might have in this domain to really engage members of Congress in a respectful way in the policymaking process. So again, how we're going to do this, we don't have to review it too in depth because I know many of you are on the line, but for those that haven't been on a core volunteer training beforehand, we are going to be in partners for the last 10 minutes. The purpose of partners is a threefold framework, one of which is to help provide some specific short-term or longer-term goals for our new volunteers to engage in each week, having these measurable targets that they can take another action on as a CCL volunteer member, and also provide a support system to really make sure that you're not doing this alone, that other people are also engaged, that they want to see you succeed, that they're setting you up to kind of have that support, and reach out to see what you might need to make that happen. And then lastly, we want to celebrate our successes and have somebody else to do that with, not only your local chapter, but for people throughout the country that you might be paired with. And so what we're going to do in a little bit is if you can type in bit.ly, it's bit.ly/CCL Partners, or you can just do this in your own email. You don't have to use the form. It's just a way to really kind of get at the same information because the screen's going to disappear in a little bit. You're essentially going to be partnered up with somebody else on the call and have a chance to learn and share about tonight's lesson with each other. And I'd love for everyone to share a name, their email, where they're from, and your biggest takeaway, any other questions you still have, and then your goals and how we can support you in achieving them. Again, after tonight, we are going to have this lesson posted. If you're interested in getting in touch with Andres, his email is listed here. It's just andres@citizensclimate.org. My email is simply brett@citizensclimate.org. And if you're interested also in knowing where the training will appear or populate tomorrow, it's just this bottom link in green. I just put it in the chat window as well. It's our Core Volunteer landing page. You can find it here in the Learning Center by clicking either in this Core Volunteer training link on the left in green, or down here on the right in our training schedule and clicking on that recording button. Partner. And we will see you back here in the same time, the same place next week. And I'll try to make sure that it's easier to access that actual link for the login as well. I know that that was a barrier tonight for attendance. So again, thank you for letting me know. Let's give a big round of applause for Andres for all of his generous time and comments. Thank you, everyone, and we will see you soon.